In a small town, where the nights were thick with fog and the streets were often empty, there stood an old house at the end of a narrow lane. It had been abandoned for years, its windows boarded up and its door hanging crooked on its hinges. Locals whispered about the house, claiming it was cursed, but no one dared to go near it until now. A group of friends, Jake, Mia, Sam, and Lily, decided to spend a night in the infamous house as a dare. They laughed off the stories, confident they would emerge unscathed. Armed with flashlights and a sense of invincibility, they entered the house just as the sun dipped below the horizon. Inside, the air was stale, filled with the scent of damp wood and decay. They stepped cautiously through the darkened rooms, the floorboards creaking ominously beneath their weight. Cobwebs hung like curtains, and shadows danced along the walls, their movements flickering in the beam of their flashlights. "Let's find the basement," Jake suggested, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "That's where all the good stuff happens in horror movies. Are you crazy?" Mia shot back, her voice trembling slightly. "What if something's down there? Come on, it'll be fun," he insisted, already moving toward the narrow staircase leading down into the darkness. Reluctantly, the others followed. As they descended, the air grew colder, thick with an unsettling heaviness. At the bottom, they found a door, its surface warped and swollen. Jake pushed it open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. The walls were lined with strange symbols, and the floor was covered in dust and debris. In the center stood an old mirror, cracked and tarnished. "Looks creepy enough," Sam said, peering into the mirror's murky surface. "What do you think happens if we touch it?" "Let's find out," Jake said, reaching out a hand. But before he could touch the glass, a chilling gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing their flashlights and plunging them into darkness. "Jake," Lily called out, her voice echoing in the silence. Panic set in as they fumbled for their phones, the dim glow barely cutting through the suffocating darkness. Suddenly, they heard a low whisper, crawling through the air like a serpent. "Get out! Get out!" It was a voice, raspy and ancient, wrapping around them, making their skin crawl. "Who's there?" Mia shouted, her voice quivering with fear. But the only response was the echo of their own breaths and the sound of the whisper growing louder. "Get out! Get out!" Jake's heart raced. "We need to leave. Now." He turned to head back to the stairs, but the room felt different. The door they had come through was gone, replaced by a solid wall. Panic erupted as they banged on the surface, desperate to escape. "Stop! Listen!" Sam yelled, holding his breath. The whispers were now joined by faint sobs, rising and falling like a mournful song. "Something's wrong. We need to wait." Before he could finish, the mirror began to ripple, the glass warping like water. A dark figure emerged from its depths, eyes glimmering with an otherworldly light. It was a woman, her face twisted in sorrow, her mouth moving as if she were speaking, but the words were lost in the swirling darkness. The friends stumbled backward, eyes wide with terror. "What is that?" Mia gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know, but we have to get out," Jake shouted, scrambling to find another way. But as they turned, they saw the shadows closing in, forming grotesque shapes that lunged toward them. "Help us! Help us!" the woman cried, her voice a haunting melody that echoed through the room. "Free us!" Lily felt a tug at her heart, a strange compulsion to move closer to the mirror. "No, don't," Sam shouted, reaching for her, but it was too late. The shadows wrapped around Lily, pulling her toward the mirror. She screamed, but it was swallowed by the whispers. "Lily!" Mia screamed, but as she reached out, the darkness engulfed her too. One by one, the shadows claimed them, their voices joining the chorus of the lost. Jake and Sam were left, shaking with fear as the dark room seemed to pulsate with life. "We can't stay here," Sam shouted, his eyes darting around for an escape. "We need to find a way out." "Over there!" Jake pointed to what appeared to be a flicker of light in the corner of the room. They sprinted toward it, their hearts pounding, but the shadows clawed at their heels, whispering promises of despair. As they reached the light, it flickered and dimmed, revealing the door that had been hidden from them. They burst through, gasping for breath, but the moment they crossed the threshold, the room shook violently. "Get out! Get out!" The voices wailed, now frantic, the shadows lashing out in fury. Jake and Sam stumbled into the hallway, the door slamming shut behind them with a deafening bang. They found themselves back in the main floor of the house, panting and disoriented. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, the shadows retreating into the corners, whispering their sorrow. "Where are the others?" Jake gasped, turning to Sam, but his heart sank at the sight of his friend's face pale, eyes wide with horror. "We have to get help," Sam said, his voice shaking. "We can't leave them. We have to go back." But as they made their way to the front door, the air shifted, growing heavier with an unbearable weight. The house creaked and groaned as if alive, the walls closing in around them. Suddenly, the whispers returned, more frantic than before. "Help us, help us." The shadows twisted into dark figures, their faces contorted in anguish. The friends stood frozen in place, terror gripping their hearts as the figures reached out, their hands stretching toward them. "Run!" Jake shouted, breaking the spell. They sprinted toward the front door, the shadows chasing after them, wailing in despair. Just as they reached the threshold, the door slammed shut, throwing them back. "Jake!" Sam cried out, scrambling to his feet. But Jake was already trying to force the door open, panic surging through him. "Come on!" With a burst of strength, Jake pushed against the door, and it creaked open, revealing the darkened night outside. They stumbled through, the chill of the air hitting them like a wave. As they turned back, the house loomed over them, its windows now dark and empty. The whispers faded into the night, but the memory of the shadows lingered like a scar on their souls. They never spoke of that night again, but in their dreams, they could still hear the whispers calling, echoing through the silence, "Help us, help us." And as time passed, the townsfolk continued to hear stories of the dark house at the end of the lane, stories of the souls lost within its walls, waiting for someone brave enough to listen.